They say that power and wealth can shield us from almost everything, but loneliness isn't one of them. In a grand mansion filled with treasures beyond most imaginations, Old Man Williams sits quietly, surrounded by riches. Yet his greatest fear isn't of loss or poverty. It's the thought that, when he can no longer stand, speak, or offer anything but a name, no one might truly care. Picture this. Exotic cars gleam in the garage, sprawling estates stretch across horizons, hotels bearing his name glow with opulence. But inside his heart, an intense, unsettling question whispers day and night. Who here loves me for me, not for my money or my legacy? That's the moment our story takes root. William Williams, affectionately known as Chief Williams, was a titan in business, a self-made billionaire who built a corporate empire from the ground up. He wasn't unkind. No, he was resolute, loving in his way, dedicated to providing every luxury for his wife, mother, and his 3 children, Frank, David, Cynthia, and his youngest, Rose. Years ticked by amidst success and celebrations. But now age had arrived. He was frail, his voice softer, his steps slower. He noticed a peculiar emptiness at the dinner table, a quiet that hid unspoken truths. Late one evening, as he gazed at an old family photograph capturing a happier time, his smiling children all gathered around, he posed a question to himself. If I were gone tomorrow, would anyone remember me with more than regret for lost inheritance? Would anyone stay to hold my hand? Or would they already be counting the days until they could claim it all? The image stared back, beautiful yet haunting. That night he summoned 2 of his oldest allies, his trusted lawyer, Mr. John, and his devoted personal physician, Dr. Maxwell. Across the polished mahogany of his study desk, he spoke in a voice heavy with longing. I want to know who in my family loves me, not for my power, not for what I leave behind, but for who I truly am, when I have nothing. A silence filled the room. The shadows of the expensive paintings on the walls seemed to lean in. John raised an eyebrow. Dr. Maxwell looked grave. And in that stillness, a plan was born. One that would blur the line between love and greed, loyalty and deceit. Williams announced softly, I want to pretend that I'm very sick terminal. Let's see who stays when the wealth is suspected to vanish. In that moment, a chill of suspense settled over the mansion's library. John gulped, glanced at the thick file on the table, then nodded. He knew exactly what that meant. Protected accounts, diverted assets, a test of hearts. Hide part of my fortune, William commanded. Open a different bank account. Transfer half of my estate out of reach. If someone is pretending, let them search and find nothing. Dr. Maxwell, nodding with solemn respect, replied, I will tell the family you have advanced cancer and less than 6 months left. I'll treat it as though it's truth, so real they won't suspect a thing. This was not a cruel prank. It was a fragile, calculated experiment. Williams wasn't testing the strength of his assets. He was testing the hearts of the people who claimed to love him. He asked his wife, Agatha, his sons, Frank, the ambitious firstborn, David, the restless traveler, his daughter Cynthia, the fashion-obsessed socialite, and most of all, Rose, the quiet youngest who always seemed by his side. But he didn't ask them in words. He would show them. And so the next morning, Williams began to cough. Not a simple throat tickle, but a heavy, ominous cough that rattled the halls. He refused to step outside. His appetite vanished. He drew the shades, retreated to the soft confines of his bed. From luxurious days to silent suffering, the act began, and with it, the stakes rose. This is more than just a story about deception. It's a life-changing test of love, a dramatic unveiling of family secrets, and a journey into the emotional battlefield where loyalty clashes with greed. As you listen or watch this unfold, ask yourself, if you were Chief Williams, how would you feel? What would you hope to find among the people you trust most? Stay with me, because the answers will break your heart, and also grant hope. The air was different that morning in the Williams mansion. Not just quieter, but heavier. Something unspoken hung over the grand chandeliers, the gold-framed portraits, the glistening marble floors. It wasn't illness, not really. It was anticipation. Chief Williams remained in bed longer than usual, coughing weakly, his voice barely above a whisper when the housemaid came in to bring his morning tea. He waved her away gently. No tea, no breakfast, just silence and the haunting sound of his breathing. Downstairs, whispers began. Did you hear him coughing again? He hasn't stepped out in days. I think he's getting worse. But upstairs, behind the closed doors of his private study, the gears of a life-changing plan were already turning. Mr. John arrived first, his leather briefcase in hand. Always calm, always precise. The man had served as Chief Williams' lawyer for over 20 years and had never seen his old friend this grave, this still. Moments later, Dr. Maxwell followed, his expression unreadable. Williams didn't waste time. "Everything is set?" he asked, his voice low. John nodded. "Yes, sir. I've opened a new account offshore and moved 50% of your liquid assets into it. The rest will remain visible for now, but no one outside of us knows about the other funds." Chief Williams nodded slowly. "Good. If they're pretending to love me for the money, I want to see how deep that act goes when they believe the wealth is limited." Dr. Maxwell cleared his throat. "And I've reviewed your medical records. I can issue a report indicating stage 4 pancreatic cancer. I'll deliver it to your family directly. 6 months to live, no treatment. It'll look and sound real. I'll even run fake scans." There was no joy in the room, no excitement in this deception, only a quiet, heavy sense of duty. A father testing the loyalty of those who once called him their world. "Thank you," Williams said. "I trust you both more than anyone. This will be hard, but necessary." He leaned back in his chair, eyes closed. For a moment, he didn't look like a billionaire. He looked like a tired man seeking truth, one last chance to feel something real. The next phase of the plan began that very evening. Dinner was canceled. Williams didn't leave his room. His coughing grew worse, echoing through the mansion like a warning bell. The family grew uneasy. Something wasn't right. The following morning, Dr. Maxwell arrived in a crisp white coat, medical file in hand. The entire family was summoned to the living room. Agatha, the once elegant wife who now spent more time with friends than at home. Frank, the eldest son with a sharp jawline and even sharper ambitions. David, the second son, always glued to his phone, always chasing the next big thing overseas. Cynthia, the fashionable daughter, always on trend, always distracted. And Rose, the quiet one, the only one who ran up the stairs when she heard her father coughing. Dr. Maxwell cleared his throat, then slowly delivered the devastating news. "I'm afraid your father has cancer. It's advanced, terminal. We estimate 6 months, maybe less." The room fell still. "No, that can't be," Cynthia whispered, her eyes wide. Rose burst into tears and rushed to her father's room without a word. David's expression hardened, his jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Frank looked away, blinking rapidly, gripping the arms of the couch. Agatha sat down slowly, a hand over her chest, whispering, "Oh no." Number. Not now. For the next few days, the house was filled with artificial warmth. Dinners were brought to his room. Kind words were spoken, hands were held, smiles forced. But even in that, Chief Williams watched closely, noting every detail. Who lingered the longest? Who asked how he slept? Who stayed behind after the others left? Behind closed eyes, he took mental notes. The test had begun, and the results were already starting to show. But this wasn't just about who would bring him soup or sit beside his bed. He wanted to see hearts, real ones. And as the days turned to weeks, it became clear. Some were waiting for his recovery. Others were already waiting for his death. What none of them knew was that the man they saw wasting away in that big, quiet room upstairs was not dying, not even sick. He was watching. He was listening. And soon he'd know who truly loved him and who was ready to sell his name before the grave was even dug. At first, it felt like love. For the first few days after the devastating news, the mansion buzzed with concern. The scent of homemade soup wafted through the hallways. Fresh flowers appeared at Chief Williams' bedside every morning. Someone was always around fluffing pillows, adjusting blankets, whispering, "Daddy, how are you feeling today?" Agatha, his wife, sat by his bed, holding his hand and humming soft tunes they used to dance to when they were young. Frank, the eldest, made grand declarations about stepping up and being the man of the house. Cynthia showed up with skincare oils and essential oils. "To keep Daddy relaxed," she said. David even skipped a business trip to be around for moral support. And then it changed. By the end of the first week, the flowers stopped coming. The food turned cold. The visits grew shorter. The smiles faded. Agatha stopped sleeping in their room. "It's too hard to watch him like this," she told the maids, dabbing her eyes dramatically. "It breaks my heart." But by evening, she was back in the TV room, wine in hand, laughing at shows. Cynthia began limiting her time upstairs. "Daddy sleeps too much," she complained. "And honestly, that room is so depressing. I can't stand the energy soon." She was out shopping again, designer clothes, new shoes, spa appointments. "I need to look good, even if things are bad," she told a friend on the phone. David, who had promised to stay a while longer, booked a last-minute flight. "Work's piling up. I'll call often, okay?" He kissed his father's forehead and disappeared, never asking if his father had eaten that day. But the most shocking shift came from Frank. One afternoon, he walked into the study, now unusually quiet, without the presence of Chief Williams. He placed a file on the desk and sat in the leather chair like he owned it. "Dad," he said, his tone soft but pointed. "I've been thinking. Maybe it's time you let me handle the company. You need to rest. Let me take care of everything." Lying in bed, weak and unmoving, Chief Williams stared at his son through tired eyes. He didn't respond immediately, just a faint nod. Frank smiled. That was all he needed. From that moment on, Frank began acting like the CEO. He strutted into the company like royalty, calling emergency meetings, moving money, announcing new projects. He replaced key executives with old-school friends, threw office parties, rented expensive cars for PR, posted motivational quotes online about building legacy and visionary leadership. Back at the mansion, Cynthia started treating the home like her personal runway. She brought friends over, hosted small brunches, and gossiped loudly in the living room about inheritance and assets. David, still abroad, kept wiring money home, but not to support his father. He was spending heavily on a woman he met online. Lavish gifts, romantic trips, fancy hotels, all charged to his father's company accounts. Agatha stopped checking in altogether. The staff now handled everything. She'd only appear when someone from outside visited, putting on her best sad face like a grieving queen. And amidst all this, Rose remained. Every morning she woke before the staff. She cleaned his room herself, wiped his face with warm cloths, made him simple meals, sang to him when his cough grew louder. She whispered stories from their childhood, told him jokes, held his hand like he might disappear if she let go. "Daddy," she'd whisper in the still of the night, tears slipping down her cheek. "Don't leave me, please. I'll take care of you, always." Chief Williams heard every word, felt every touch, counted every sacrifice. And every time someone else walked by his room without stopping, every time he heard laughter downstairs while he lay dying alone upstairs, his heart broke a little more. One day, while Rose was out rinsing a cloth, he whispered to the ceiling, "So this is how it ends. A family I built with blood and sweat, now too busy dividing the gold to care whether I breathe or not." Just then, loud music echoed from downstairs. Laughter, clinking glasses. Frank was throwing another party. And in that moment, Chief Williams knew this wasn't just a test anymore. It was a revelation. They weren't just failing. They were showing him exactly who they were. But one question still haunted him. If this is how they act when I'm sick, what would they do if they thought I was already gone? While chaos crept through the mansion like a growing shadow, one light refused to dim. Rose. Each morning, while the rest of the family argued about meetings, sales, parties, and promotions, Rose quietly slipped into her father's room before sunrise. She would open the windows to let in the fresh morning air, carefully wipe his forehead, massage his shoulders, and whisper, "Good morning, Daddy. You're still here, and so am I." She brought him meals with her own hands, simple porridge, warm soup, fresh juice. When he struggled to eat, she fed him, spoon by spoon, never rushing, never turning away when he coughed. She read to him, told him about her day, played soft music to help him sleep. Sometimes, when she thought he wasn't listening, she'd cry gently, brushing back his graying hair. "I don't care about the company, the houses, or the hotels," she whispered one night. "I just want my father back. The one who used to carry me on his back, who called me Little Sunshine." Chief Williams remained silent, but every word reached his soul like rain after drought. Outside that room, the world was changing, and not for the better. Frank had fully assumed command of the company, but instead of stability, he brought storm. He fired the loyal workers who had stood by the company through thick and thin. Some of them had served for decades. In their place, he installed friends with no experience, but lots of charm. The office became a playground for power and parties. One evening, Frank stood at the head of a long conference table, suit perfectly pressed, flashing his signature smirk. "We're starting something bold," he announced. "A luxury fashion brand, clothes, bags, perfumes, premium only. Go big or go home." A timid staff member raised her hand. "Sir, we don't have the capital for this right now." Frank laughed. "Then borrow. It's still my father's company for now." Meanwhile, Cynthia had turned her attention to family property. She began asking about land titles, hidden accounts, even the ownership of their father's vintage cars. One afternoon, she confronted Agatha in the living room. "Mom, why are we holding on to that land in Riverdale?" she asked, arms crossed. Agatha raised an eyebrow. "Because your father hasn't signed it over yet." Cynthia scoffed. "He's dying, Mom. And let's be real, he's not walking out of that room." They didn't know Chief Williams had overheard every word. His heart clenched, not from illness, but from heartbreak. And yet, he stayed still, silent, watching. The real spark came when Frank called for an emergency family meeting in the mansion's living room. David, back from abroad, had heard of Frank's reckless decisions and came storming into the room. "What's wrong with you?" he yelled. "You're turning Dad's company into a circus." Frank leaned back in his chair. "Wake up, David. Dad's not coming back. I'm just preparing for the inevitable." "You think you're smarter because you're the eldest?" David shot back. "You're ruining everything he built." Tempers flared. Insults flew, then fists. Frank shoved David. David punched him. Chairs crashed. Glass shattered. Agatha screamed. The staff ran for cover. Rose heard the commotion and rushed in, her eyes red with exhaustion, her hands stained from tending to her father's bed sores. "Enough!" she cried, her voice shaking. "You're fighting while Daddy is still alive upstairs? You're selling things, dividing things, celebrating like he's already dead. How did we get here? Is this who we are?" The room went silent. Her tears were louder than their shouting. Later that night, Rose sat by her father's bed, her fingers trembling as she fed him warm pap. Her voice was barely audible through the sorrow in her throat. "Daddy, please eat." "I need you to eat." Chief Williams opened his eyes, weak but focused. He looked at her for a long time before whispering, "Thank you for staying." It was just 4 words, but to Rose it felt like a mountain had moved. In the guest room turned sick room, Rose had become nurse, daughter, guardian, friend. She had given up sleep, comfort, and even her dignity, shielding her father not only from sickness, but from the cruelty outside that door. What the others didn't realize was that while they saw a dying man, she saw her father. And while they calculated what they could gain, she only wanted what they had already lost: family, love, unity. One night, as the wind howled through the mansion windows and the laughter from downstairs rose once more, Chief Williams whispered to the ceiling, "I asked for a test, and now I see the answer." But the test wasn't over yet, because even the ones who had failed were still capable of doing worse. The cracks had become canyons. Within weeks, the once glorious Williams estate no longer felt like a home. It felt like a battleground. Where there used to be the soft sound of classical music and polished marble echoing with laughter, now there was tension in every corner, like a storm permanently waiting to explode. Downstairs, loud phone calls, slammed doors, and shouting had become part of the daily soundtrack. Upstairs, Chief Williams, still ill, watched it all unfold through whispers, reports from his loyal staff, and the painful silence that filled his room when no one but Rose visited. The company was in trouble, and Frank was to blame. The luxury fashion brand he'd launched with such pride had flopped hard. Overpriced clothes, poor designs, zero market research. It was a vanity project, not a business plan. Investors started pulling out. Suppliers stopped delivering. Bills went unpaid. The company's bank account bled red. Frank, now desperate, held another board meeting. "We need fast cash," he barked. "We're selling the Sunray Grand Hotel." A staff member blinked. "Sir, the hotel's not yours to sell. It's still in your father's name." Frank waved his hand. He's not dead yet, but he's not living either. Just do it. But he was too late. David had already sold it days earlier quietly, without telling anyone. Worse, he'd sold it under shady terms to a group of trusted buyers who, unknown to him, were secretly working for Mr. John, their father's lawyer. The money? Pocketed. When Cynthia found out, she stormed into the living room like a whirlwind. "You sold Dad's hotel? Are you mad? That was supposed to be mine." David looked up lazily from the couch, remote in hand. "I did what needed to be done." "You thief!" she screamed and slapped him across the face. David slapped her back, glasses shattered, chairs overturned, staff scrambled. Rose came running. "What is wrong with you?" she cried, blocking them. "Daddy is still alive. Can't you all see how disgusting this is?" Cynthia stormed out. David threw up his hands. Frank, hearing the commotion, came in seconds later. "Is it true?" he asked David, voice like ice. "You sold the hotel?" David nodded. "Yeah, so what?" Frank charged forward and grabbed David's collar. "You sold what was mine." "What was yours?" David shouted back. "You're not even running the company right." They wrestled, again. Agatha finally walked in, eyes tired. "Enough. Both of you. David, you won't return the money, right?" David folded his arms. "Fine," she sighed. "Frank, sell something else. Another house. A car. Just fix the company." Frank's eyes narrowed. "Not my car." Agatha didn't blink. "Then sell your father's white SUV." Rose, who had just walked in holding her father's medication, froze. "Mama, what did you say?" Agatha turned. "You heard me." "We need the money." "That's Daddy's favorite car," Rose whispered, her voice cracking. "You want to sell it while he's still alive?" Agatha clapped her hands sharply. "What use is it now?" "He's not driving it. We need cash." The room fell silent, except for the sound of Rose's heart breaking. That night, Rose barely slept. She sat beside her father, holding his hand, tears streaming down her cheeks. His chest rose and fell gently, his eyes closed. He hadn't spoken much since the last outburst, but when she squeezed his hand softly, he opened his eyes. "I'm tired, Daddy," she whispered. "Tired of all of them. You gave them everything, and they've given you nothing but greed and shame." Chief Williams didn't speak. He just stared at the ceiling. His eyes weren't blank. They were watching something far away, something heavy. Meanwhile, Frank made his next move. The next morning, he stood in front of the family, papers in hand. "The company is collapsing," he said. "We're out of time. I'm selling the Sunray Grand Hotel to save it." But Cynthia folded her arms, her voice cutting like glass. "You're too late. David already sold it." The room went still. Frank's face twisted in disbelief. "You... what?" Agatha gasped. "David, is that true?" David nodded. "I used the money more wisely than you would." Frank lunged again. Another fight erupted. Agatha screamed. Rose screamed louder. "Stop! What is wrong with you people?" No one answered, not because they didn't have words, but because they were too deep in their own war to hear truth anymore. That night, as Chief Williams lay in the dark, he whispered to himself, "I gave them my empire. They gave me betrayal." Then he turned to Rose, his voice weaker than ever. "Take me away." She looked at him. "Where?" "Home," he whispered. "Real home. Where love still means something." And just like that, a decision was made. One that would change everything. The mansion was no longer a home. It was a battlefield built on broken promises and fractured bloodlines. That night, after yet another screaming match between Frank and David, over who had the right to sell what Rose sat beside her father, and knew deep in her soul that she had to act. She could no longer watch him fade in silence, while the people who once claimed to love him tore his legacy to pieces like vultures over a carcass. The man who had once commanded boardrooms with his voice, who had built an empire from the ground up, now lay like a ghost in his own house, not because of sickness, but because of heartbreak. "Daddy," Rose whispered gently, brushing back his silver hair, "you don't belong here anymore." He didn't respond with words, just the faintest nod, and that was all she needed. The next morning, long before the others woke up, Rose packed a small bag. She wrapped her father in warm blankets, called the old driver she still trusted, and quietly wheeled Chief Williams out the back door. No announcement, no explanation, just an escape. Destination: the village where he was born. The ride was long and dusty. Trees blurred past the window. Birds sang louder than city horns. And for the first time in weeks, the air didn't smell of tension. It smelled of rain, earth, and peace. When they arrived, the entire village stirred. News spread fast. Chief Williams is back, and he's not well. Old men came with walking sticks. Women brought fruits, warm meals, and pots of herbs. Children peeked shyly around corners, whispering legends about the man who once paid for their school buildings and village wells. He built our community hall. He sent my brother to the university. He gave my father the loan that saved our farm. One elder looked at Rose and said, "Your father may be weak now, but to us, he is a giant." Rose smiled through tears. Here, her father was not a patient. He was a treasure. They placed him in a small, clean hut at the back of the family compound. The walls were made of clay, the windows wide open to the sun and breeze. There was no marble, no luxury bedding, but there was peace and love. One morning, an elderly herbalist arrived. Tall, with deep-set eyes and white chalk across his cheeks, he walked slowly into the hut, his bag filled with roots and bottles. "I heard a great man has returned," he said softly. "Let me see him." Rose stepped outside, giving them privacy. Inside, the herbalist sat beside Chief Williams and studied him in silence. "You're not sick," he said after a long pause. "Your eyes, they still burn with purpose." Chief Williams opened his mouth for the first time in days. "Because I'm not dying." The herbalist blinked. "What do you mean?" "I don't have cancer," Williams whispered. "I never did." And then, slowly, painfully, he told the truth. About the plan, the test, the lies he allowed to take root so he could see the truth of his family's heart. About the lawyer and the doctor who helped him. About Rose, the only one who never changed. The herbalist listened in stunned silence. Then he let out a long breath and nodded slowly. "You are not just a chief," he said. "You are a man of vision. Few would dare test their bloodline this way. But I am broken," Williams said quietly. "Because now, I know the herbalist placed a warm hand on his chest. Then let that knowledge heal you, not destroy you. Your daughter still stands beside you. That is more than many men have in a lifetime." Outside, Rose paced nervously. When the herbalist finally stepped out, she rushed forward. "Is he okay? Will the medicine work?" The man smiled gently. "Your love is already doing the healing." She blinked, confused. "What?" "He's stronger than you think." And for the first time in what felt like forever, Rose smiled with hope. That night, under a blanket of stars, Chief Williams sat in a wooden chair, watching village children chase fireflies. The smell of firewood, the rhythm of drums from afar, it all reminded him of something he thought he'd lost. Peace. He looked at Rose sitting beside him and whispered, "This is what home feels like." And Rose knew that even if nothing else changed, even if he never walked again or returned to the city, this moment was enough. But fate had other plans, because back in the city, greed wasn't done with the Williams name just yet. The air in the Williams mansion was thick, not with dust, but with the weight of guilt, secrets, and fear. Each room, once filled with opulence, now echoed with silence and shame. Frank paced the living room like a caged animal. His once confident swagger had faded, replaced by clenched fists and sleepless eyes. The company was on the verge of collapse. The hotel had mysteriously returned to the family's control, and none of the buyers David contacted would take his calls anymore. Cynthia scrolled endlessly through her phone, avoiding eye contact with everyone. David sat by the window, jaw clenched, staring into nothing. Agatha, once regal, now moved around the house in silence, avoiding mirrors as if afraid of her own reflection. But no one expected what happened next. That morning, the gates slowly creaked open. The mansion guards froze, then gasped. A black SUV rolled in quietly, and out stepped the man they all thought was dying. Chief Williams, not frail, not coughing, not weak. He stood tall, strong, calm. Rose walked beside him, gently holding his arm. She said nothing. Her expression was unreadable. Inside, Cynthia was the first to see him. She dropped her phone. Daddy? David stumbled from his chair. What? How? Frank walked in, wine glass in hand. The glass shattered to the floor. You're alive, he whispered. From the kitchen, Agatha stepped in, drying her hands. What's all the... Her eyes locked onto him. She froze, then leaned against the wall for support. You're walking. You're strong. Chief Williams said nothing. He simply walked past them all and entered his study, the very place where the plan had begun. Minutes later, the entire family gathered. Mr. John, the family lawyer, arrived soon after, carrying a brown folder. The old man sat at the center of the room, composed like a judge in his courtroom. His eyes scanned every face, his son's, his daughter's, his wife. I suppose you all have questions, he said, his voice firm. Let me give you the answers. He took a breath. I was never sick. I never had cancer. I never had 6 months to live. A gasp swept through the room. It was all a test, he continued. A test of loyalty. A test of love. A test to see who would stand by me when I had nothing to offer. Frank stepped forward, face red. You tricked us? I gave you an opportunity, Chief replied, to prove your love was real. Instead, you proved something else. He turned to Frank. You sacked loyal workers who built the company with me. You threw parties, misused funds, and turned the business into a joke. You sold property that wasn't yours, and when things collapsed, you blamed everyone but yourself. Frank lowered his head. To David, Chief's voice was colder. You sold my most prized hotel, my land. You betrayed the business, and worse, you betrayed my trust. David tried to speak, but words failed. Then Cynthia. You stood by while others tore each other apart, but you were just as greedy. You wanted land that didn't belong to you. You cared more about handbags than your father's health. Cynthia's eyes welled with tears. Lastly, he turned to Agatha. You were my wife, the woman I gave my youth, my name, my wealth, and yet You abandoned me, slept with another man under my roof, and brought him into my home like I was already dead." Agatha sank to the floor. "Please, I begged you all in silence," Chief Williams continued, his voice shaking. "I coughed until my throat bled. I waited for someone to care, but only one person stayed. One child held my hand, fed me, bathed me, prayed for me, took me away when this house became unbearable." He looked at Rose. "My Rose." The room turned to her. "I gave you all a test," Chief said, "and only she passed." He opened the folder Mr. John had brought. "Effective immediately, Rose is the sole inheritor of my estate. The company, the lands, the hotels, the homes, everything I own now belongs to her." The room erupted. "What? You can't be serious. Daddy, please." But Chief Williams raised his hand. "I'm done with speeches. I've seen your hearts. Now you can see the consequences." He stood, slowly but firmly, and looked at Mr. John. "Prepare the transition documents. As of today, Rose is the new CEO, and bring back every loyal worker Frank fired." Mr. John nodded. "Already in motion, sir." Rose remained silent, her eyes filled with tears, but not of triumph, of pain. Because even in justice there is grief. And though the truth had finally been revealed, the damage done could never be undone. But from this day on, healing could begin. 1 year later, the Williams legacy had changed, not in wealth, but in meaning. Under the calm yet decisive leadership of Rose, the company not only stabilized, it soared. Profits doubled. 2 new branches opened across the country. International partnerships blossomed. And for the first time in years, the business had a soul again. She didn't do it with flash or noise. She did it with integrity. Rose brought back every old employee her brother had once thrown out like trash. She reassembled the team that had helped build her father's empire one meeting at a time, one handwritten thank you letter at a time. They didn't call her ma'am. They called her Madam Rose the Wise. Inside the company walls, workers smiled again. Loyalty was repaid. Mistakes were corrected. And every Friday, Rose would send a handwritten card to her father, who had returned to the mansion quietly, now content to spend his days tending his garden and watching the sunrise. He was no longer just a wealthy man. He was a man at peace. As for the others, Frank found work at a mid-level firm in a distant city. It wasn't failure, but it wasn't glory either. The company didn't carry his last name. And every time he signed a paycheck, he was reminded of what he'd lost, not because he lacked talent, but because he lacked humility. David, shaken by the collapse of his online romance scandal and the backlash from former investors, stepped out of business altogether. He joined a charity abroad, working quietly, rebuilding his name from scratch. Rumors said he cried when Rose sent him a letter simply saying, "I forgive you. I just wish you had shown your heart sooner." Cynthia tried to find footing in real estate, but never found the same rhythm. She visited her father monthly, each time bringing something handmade, something small cookies, a painting, a letter. She never asked for money again. Not once. And Agatha? No one saw her for months. Some said she moved out of the country. Others claimed she remarried. Chief Williams never spoke of her again. And when her name came up, he'd simply look away, not with hatred, but with a sadness too deep for words. But it was Rose who stood tallest, not because she inherited the empire, but because she carried the burden with grace. One evening she visited her father's room. He was sitting by the window, watching the sunset, a cup of tea in his hand. "You look like your mother," he said softly. Rose smiled. I hope I'm kinder." He chuckled, then looked at her. I was harsh, maybe even cruel, pretending the way I did, but without that test, I would have died not knowing who truly loved me. Rose sat beside him. "And now you know." He nodded. "Yes, and I want the world to know too, that love, real love, is not loud. It's not convenient. It's not built on gifts or inheritance. It's shown in quiet moments when no one is watching, when there's nothing to gain." He placed his hand over hers. "You taught me that." That week, the company launched a new campaign, Legacy Over Luxury, featuring the stories of old workers, new innovations, and the story of a daughter who chose love over power. The ad went viral, not because it was flashy, but because it was real. Thousands commented, "This story broke me. We need more leaders like Rose." I sent this to my mom. We cried together back at the mansion. Life found a new rhythm. Laughter returned, but softer now. Conversations became honest. And every time someone asked Chief Williams what saved him, he'd smile and point toward his daughter's office. She did. Her love, not my money. The morale. We often measure family by blood. But loyalty is what reveals the truth. In a world where people love for what they can get, may we all find a Rose in our lives, or better yet, choose to be one. Because sometimes, the wealth we leave behind isn't in dollars, but in how we're remembered, with love, with honor, with truth.